Ed Diehl, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
So let's start off. What separates you from the rest of the GOP field?
Well, that's a good question. I think first and foremost, my background is in engineering and business, and that's unique in the whole field. I mean, when I came to Oregon with my wife, decided to raise our family here, and we wanted to build a business. So a few years after coming here, we started a business that did control systems integration, factory automation. And I bootstrapped that with two business partners. I sold a car, I leveraged my credit cards, had two young kids at home, left a good job, and put everything on the line. But it was a dream that we had to build that. I'd wanted to do that since I'd seen my grandfather and his brothers in their business. And so we built that up to 100 employees, and and in multiple offices in Washington and Oregon and North Carolina. And I think that experience, building that business, building an Oregon business, signing both sides of a paycheck, getting paid last after you pay your employees and hope there's something left. And that's what it's like when you're doing a startup. And then riding through a recession, a tough recession in '08, and scrimping and saving to keep every employee on so we could ride that storm and come out strong. Those are the things that I experience, and I bring that to the governor's office. The other thing is, frankly, is this referendum effort. I had the opportunity, and I jumped at the opportunity to lead the volunteer effort for this referendum. And we were told what we did was impossible. And so I took that as a challenge. I wanted to be the point on the volunteer signature gathering effort. And we got 250,000 signatures in 38 days. That is a record. I think it showed Oregonians how I could lead and rally and organize and get big things done. I've spent my career solving problems and delivering results, and I think I showed it to all Oregonians. So what makes me unique, that's unique in the field, and I think I'm in a unique position to win this thing because I'm in a unique position to rally voters who have not been engaged. We just did an event last night. I met people there who had never been to a political event ever, and they're coming to my event. We had people in the referendum effort who've never been involved in a referendum, or never been involved in the political process, gathering signatures. And when I look at how many Republicans are not voting and how many conservative-minded, non-affiliated voters that are not voting, I'm going to work like nobody's business to get those folks off the bench and to vote, give them a reason to vote. And if we do that, we can change the trajectory of this state.
You talked about getting paid last. A lot of Oregon taxpayers might feel like they're getting paid last here. At least, many of them have reached out to express those frustrations. How do you bring accountability or an increase in accountability to Salem?
Well, you talked about it with taxes. We're hearing this everywhere we go. Everybody's complaining about taxes. That's why it's my new middle name. And that's in Portland or Eastern Oregon. It doesn't matter where I go. People feel like they're taxed enough, and they're not getting the value for that. And when I look at it, I've been in the legislature since 2023. I see kind of an apathy within our state agencies. They're not accountable. We've had 4 decades, 40 years of one-party governance in this state, and it shows. We've doubled our state budget in 10 years. Since COVID, just our budget on payroll, government payroll, has exploded. So what I want to do is come in and do deep, detailed performance audits of every one of these state agencies by fund and subfund, so people understand exactly where the money's going. I also am going to go through and identify new leadership in almost every agency. And I look at it as a business guy. I want leaders in these agencies that can do a deep dive and look for fraud and waste, but mostly align them on the core mission of these agencies. These agencies are not aligned on mission. Is ODOT aligned on mission? Do you think the Department of Education is aligned on mission, spending more and more money and getting the worst results in the country? they're not aligned on their core mission. And I will be actively engaged with these agency leaders. And I don't see that from our governor right now. So it's a completely different mindset and approach to state agencies, and that's why I'm confident we can reduce state spending and why I've promoted reducing taxes as well.
You touched on education there. The recent test scores, depends on which study you look at, but the results have not been good. I think both Republicans and Democrats would agree with that, and people look to states like Mississippi and they see what they've been able to accomplish. If you're elected, what specifically would you do to try to flip the script there and turn things around?
Yeah, well, if Mississippi can figure this out, Oregon can figure this out. This is a national embarrassment at the state of our schools. I see it as we have to get back to really the fundamentals of a good K through 12 education system. And I look at accountability and discipline and excellence. We have to restore testing standards across the board. We have to restore accountability, and that includes accountability for students and accountability for parents as well. And we have to give teachers the ability to just do basic discipline in their own classrooms. I've talked to teachers who are so frustrated, with scratches on their arms, dealing with issues that they should not have to deal with in the classroom. And that is due to some legislation that has come out of the Oregon State Legislature. So those things need to be restored. We should be enforcing truancy. We have high absenteeism rates. But mostly it is getting our education system focused on just the fundamentals of reading and writing and arithmetic, producing citizens who understand our history and the culture, our Constitution, the value of free market and capitalism. We need to be teaching those things. I don't know if you're aware, but a few years ago, we had to spend millions of dollars, the state did, to teach our teachers phonics. They did not learn phonics in their own training. And is it any wonder that we're performing near the bottom of the barrel for fourth grade reading levels? They need to go back to teaching basic fundamentals, using tried and true and tested methods for education. And I look at what the Department of Education is guiding for a curriculum, and it's just off the mark. And that will change when I'm governor. In Oregon, the governor is the superintendent of public education. Another thing is I will redirect a lot of the funding that's going to administration, and that will go into the classroom.
There's a lot of talk in this campaign about, perhaps Salem needs an outsider rather than somebody who's, on the inside, and you serve in the legislature now. Mm-hmm. So, what would you say to those who say, hey, you are already an insider? If you can't make a change now, why should we count on you now?
Well, I've been in the legislature not quite 4 years. I don't think that qualifies me as an insider. And I think when Oregonians say outsider, I don't think they mean somebody from California either. I believe that, I spent my career in engineering and business. That is how I built my career. I have served briefly in the legislature, and I think it's enough for me to see what's broken, but it's not long enough to break me. Okay. And I think that's a good perspective. And I'll tell you, the legislature is a lousy training ground to be in an executive position. And I think Governor Kotek shows that. She spent her career in nonprofits and the legislature, Speaker of the House for 10 years, governor now for almost 4. Her record is pretty pitiful. So being a legislator is not a training ground to be an executive.
Let's talk about public disorder, because it seems like a lot of the problems we have come down to that. Businesses leave if their employees don't feel safe. And as a result, the tax base is reduced. There's less revenue to pay for the programs that we want. We get into this doom loop type of a situation. How do we fix that? What do we do?
Yeah, well, you hit on it. Portland is in a doom loop. Tax rates sky high, but tax revenue going down. Businesses are leaving. People of means are leaving. I talked to a business up there. They told me, if I came from New York, I paid a lot of taxes and I got something for it. I moved to Portland, I pay a lot in taxes and I'm not getting anything for it. And if things don't change, I'm picking up my business and I'm moving it to Arizona. But it's not just Portland. I was down in White City talking to Pavati Boats. They have been trying to get an audience with Governor Kotek, and she doesn't give them the time of day. But they do get an audience with Governor Greg Abbott in Texas. And they've made a decision to move their business to Texas. So it's a combination of things. It's a tax structure that is really anti-business. That's why I'm calling for the elimination of the hidden sales tax, our corporate activities tax. It's regulations that tie up projects sometimes for years to do basic things. That's with permitting and agency regulation, and that's everything from the DEQ to our land use laws. It makes it very expensive and difficult to get basic things done. As governor, with a business perspective, I will make that a focus. I will be a governor that is talking to businesses to bring them to Oregon. And I will create a regulatory and tax environment that is inviting for those businesses. And it's about jobs. It's about good paying jobs, and not just in Portland, but elsewhere in the state. But most importantly, I want to be talking to businesses that are already here. How can we help you grow? What is in your way? I know a lot of the answers. We have Governor Kotek going around the state right now talking about her prosperity roadmap. And she's asking businesses, what do we do? How can we help you? Her response is, their response is, why don't you veto that Senate Bill 1507, which disconnected us from all those tax breaks from the federal government? Well, she just signed it. But I'm a chief petitioner to bring that one to the voters, just like we did the tax and fee referendum, and the voters can decide. We'll have that on the ballot, and those tax breaks will be reenacted, and so businesses can take advantage of that. But she's not listening to the people, even though she's on this road tour. She told a bunch of business folks down in Medford that we have a PR problem. We don't have a business climate problem, we have a PR problem. She does not understand the issue.
What about the so-called catch and release criminal justice policies, Senate Bill 48? What would you like to see change, and what would you do if you were in office?
I've talked to a lot of folks in law enforcement. Our son is a Marion County Sheriff's detective. They will tell you that bill has been a real problem. And so we have an initiative petition that we're working with Representative Mannix to reverse a lot of Senate Bill 48. I brought some legislation. It didn't go anywhere in the legislature, but we believe if we take that directly to the people, that we can get some action. So that's one of the issues that is really tying the hands of our law enforcement. It's not the only one. When I've talked to law enforcement, another one has to do with some of the sanctuary policies that we have in this state. And we have a situation, and it came in 2021 when when an executive order from Governor Kate Brown was put into law. It's called the Sanctuary Promise Act, that drew this hard line between local law enforcement and the federal government. You can't even cooperate, or you can't even communicate, much less cooperate. And what that has done is really frustrated law enforcement. So when I talk to my local sheriff, he said that's the number one thing. We need to be able to communicate with these guys and understand what they do. And the focus is getting criminals out of our state.
Well, let's talk about that. The Democrats will come out, whoever the GOP candidate is, and attempt to tie them to President Trump's policies, the federal government's policies. and that may or may not be a wise political strategy. But where do you diverge from, the Trump administration's policies when it comes to immigration enforcement? When it comes to some of these issues that we're not talking national politics, but things that do affect people here in the state.
You're right. They're gonna, no matter who comes out of the Republican primary, they're gonna label them. They're gonna run against Trump. Because Tina Kotek has nothing good to run on. Every single one of her policies is a failure. You can measure it. So she's going to run a campaign against Trump. So first off, I'm 100% Oregon, and I realize our problems that we have in the state are Oregon problems caused by poor Oregon leadership, and they will be fixed by new Oregon leadership that I'll bring as governor. That said, there are some things that I would challenge the current administration on. One is with tariffs. Oregon is a very trade-dependent state. I got this button from Vic Atiyeh. Vic Atiyeh spent a lot of time building trade in Oregon, and we benefit greatly from that. But with that means if you have tariffs and an uncertain tariff policy, that affects a lot of our businesses, agriculture and otherwise. So I'd like to talk to the Trump administration about that, say, here's how it's impacting certain niche industries in Oregon. The other one is with the National Guard. As governor, the National Guard reports to me, and I would stand firm on that. So those are two areas. And with immigration, I want to cooperate and communicate with federal authorities to get drug dealers, human traffickers, and gang members out of Oregon. And I have some questions about some of the other things that I've read in the press about folks that I don't think are necessarily the target by the federal administration. There's folks here who've lived here for 20, 30 years. They're paying taxes. They're trying to do the right thing. I don't believe that they're the target, but I believe because of our policy and that Sanctuary Promise Act that was put in place, where we're releasing criminals back into the community instead of deporting them, that has raised the temperature and raised the fear level for a lot of people that should not be living in fear. And I look at that as due to Tina Kotek's policies, and that would change.
Your first week in office, let's say you're elected, what would you do? What would you tackle first?
Boy, there's so many things.
Yeah.
I'm a problem solver, and we have a lot of problems. So, well, one thing, there are some executive orders that have been put in place that I would eliminate. One is the Climate Protection Plan, which hasn't even hit yet, but it is a disaster. It is a horrendous fee that will be imposed on anybody that's producing fuel or carbon or a consumer of those products, and those fees, they're not really fees, but they go to a nonprofit that will redistribute that for climate justice programs. It's like cap and trade on steroids. That needs to go away. There's some other executive orders that are related to clean fuels that are jacking up our energy costs considerably. I hear that all over the place. When I talk to Oregonians about high energy costs, I will repeal those as well. And the other thing I will do, like I said, on day one, I will come in on day one with a new plan for each and every agency, and that includes new leadership, a new mission, and focusing them on their core mission.
The amount of money that goes to NGOs, non-government organizations, and nonprofits, it's increasing every year. Yet there doesn't seem to be, in many cases, accountability or ways to track where those dollars are going and what results are coming from those dollars. How would you address that? Because you can call it a homeless industrial complex or whatever.
That's
you want.
what I call it.
Okay, well, that's what some might call it. Some agencies, perhaps perform better than others. But how do you address that, and how do you bring accountability to those agencies so the taxpayers know what it is they're getting?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple that you hold the NGOs accountable to specific outcomes. You know, if you're an NGO that is serving the homeless, how many are you serving, and what are your outcomes after 1 year? Are they in a better place? And that's measurable. We don't even track the data. We don't even expect our NGOs to track who they serve. So it's an impossible situation. So to me, it's really simple. And I've talked to some organizations, some Portland organizations that are very like-minded on this. Let's identify the outcomes, the results we want, and let's track it. So that's a huge step.
Where do you stand on, you know, the housing first approach versus the triage approach? I mean, is the housing first approach really a pragmatic way to go about solving the homeless problem, or do we need to triage people first so they can be a responsible renter, responsible homeowner?
The housing first model is an epic failure. What we're doing right now with our homeless policies, we're enabling destructive, antisocial behavior. Putting somebody in a house while they're still suffering from drug addiction or mental illness, or they have no life skill set, is not helping them. I believe in providing basic shelter with rules, requirements, making sure people have access to drug addiction treatment and mental health treatment and other wraparound services, because we have to remember or realize some of these folks there's a lot of skills that we have, just day-to-day skills that a lot of these people don't have, and we take them for granted. So I do believe we need to help people get back on their feet. But with that comes some accountability, and our systems, the ones Governor Kotek has put in place, don't require any accountability. Our tax dollars are going, you put them in a home with no accountability, we're providing free pipes and needles and foil to help them continue in their destructive, addictive behavior. Along with that, one thing I would work on is repealing House Bill 3115, which would restore local communities' ability to prohibit public camping. The state took that away a few years ago, and I want to restore that.
Anything else that you want voters to know as we wrap up that we haven't touched on today?
You know, one thing that's really important to me is our natural resources. I grew up on a cattle ranch. My dad was a logger and a truck driver. One grandpa was a sawmiller, the other grandpa was a forest ranger. So, and I also I understand what it's like to grow up a long way away from where all the decisions are being made. But I see Oregon as we sit on a bounty of natural resources and immense wealth that we're not taking advantage of. And specifically when it comes to our forests. We have some of the most productive forest lines in the world. And the state-owned forests are some of the most productive of those most productive. And our policies have locked these up in the name of the climate. And in the process, we've let fuels build up. We've had wildfires that are way more devastating than they should be. I want to reverse that. I want to see sustainable harvesting, so we have beautiful forests. We have good paying jobs, especially in our rural areas, and we're bringing in rural tax revenue. It is a win-win-win for our forests and for our communities, and that's a big thing. Not just with our timberlands, but with our mineral resources as well. So there's a lot of things around that. And I disagree with the basic philosophy that, you know, locking those up in the name of the climate or the environment. We still use those resources. So we import lumber from other places. We import lithium from other places that don't have, lithium in particular, we're importing it from foreign adversaries that do not have any of our environmental standards. And we're denying Oregonians good paying jobs. It makes no sense for the climate or for the Oregon economy. And so really unleashing those natural resources is very important to me. And I think it's important to the Oregon people too.
To be clear, though, you still you want to protect the environment. And
Yes.
and because people watching this might say, well, okay, it's free for all, and there'll be no regulations or oversight.
No. We all want clean air and clean water. But we also want jobs. We also want a way of life that we can afford. You know, what good is having a beautiful Oregon if you can't afford to live here, or if your children have to leave? So I want an Oregon that works for everybody. That's the greatest place to live, to work, to raise a family, and retire in a place where your kids and grandkids don't have to leave to find a better job. We can do that. You can have beautiful forests and good paying jobs and forests that don't burn if you manage them actively. And I live just outside the Santiam Canyon. Nobody wants forest land more than me. I mean, I look at it every day. And the people who live and work and recreate in those areas, they're the ones that want that there for their generation and the next generation. They're the best stewards of that land. And it's not just the timber land, it's the ranch land, it's the grazing land. I trust those folks to make good judgment on that, good environmentally conscious judgment using the best available science and data. And that's what I want to see.
Ed Diehl, thank you so much
Hey,
for your
thank
time.
you.